Hello and welcome. My name is Tyler, and this is my first video for the Pages of Light channel that I decided to start. And today we're going to be doing a review from a Christian worldview, which is the title of the series of videos I'm going to be doing a lot of on this channel. I really like it. It rhymes, sounds nice. You get all the aspects of what we want to accomplish here. And today we're going to be looking at a fantasy novel called The Shadow of What Was Lost by James Islington, which is the first in the Licanius trilogy. I have the other two books right on my shelf there, the red and the blue spine there, if you can see them. So I'll review both of those as I get to them. But without further ado, let's get into this review. As destiny calls, a journey begins. It has been 20 years since the godlike augurs were overthrown and killed. Now those who once served them, the gifted, are spared only because they have accepted the rebellion's four tenets, vastly limiting their own power. As a gifted, Davian suffers the consequences of a war lost before he was even born. He and others like him are despised. But when Davian discovers he wields the forbidden power of the augurs, he sets into motion a chain of events that will change everything. To the west, a young man whose fate is intertwined with Davian's wakes up in the forest with no memory of who he is. And in the far north, an ancient enemy long thought defeated begins to stir. Alright, so how the reviews from our Christian worldview is going to work is first we're just going to do a general review of the book, what I thought about the characters, the world building, the plot, all that kind of stuff, like a normal review. And then at the end we'll look at some specifically Christian elements that I've found in the story, and we can talk a little bit about those. And if you've also read the book, feel free to leave your thoughts on it in the comments, things you found, things you noticed, things you really liked about it, what you didn't like, and then whatever Christian themes that you also saw in the book, and we can have a little bit of a conversation down below in the comments about that. So The Shadow of What Was Lost, it follows basically four main characters. You have Davian, Weir, or Were, depending on how you want to pronounce it, Asha, and Caden. So Davian is probably the main character. You heard him talked about a little bit in the voiceover from the back of the book. Weir is Davian's best friend at a school that they attend in Caladel. It's a school for the gifted, and they're there to train how to use their powers in order to pass their trials, which is like their final test at the end of school. And then you also have Asha, who's also one of the students at the school, and she's also very good friends with Davian and Weir. And then you have Caden, who is the mysterious person that you also heard about, who wakes up in the woods with no memory of who he is or why he's where he's at. And so as you kind of go along the story, you figure out more about who he is. Although you don't really get concrete answers until the very end of the story. So overall, I think the world building was pretty well done. I think James was able to describe the factions pretty well and their motives. So as you heard in the back of the book section, there was these things called the four tenets, which kind of keep the magic users in check, essentially. So you have the people who instituted those rules, who are led by the North Warden and the King. And those are called, that's like the administrators, essentially. That's like the ruling class. And then you have the gifted and the magic users, who are subject to those rules. And so you have so different factions within the magic users section, and you have some factions within the ruling class, and everyone has their own different motives. And so it's pretty well described, and you can kind of see the tension between those two factions played out throughout the story. There is a map in the front of the book which shows you some of the locations that you'll be exploring throughout the book, and we only get to see about 20% of the map maybe as you read, which just means there's more to explore in the other two books, which is a good thing. I'm going to throw up a picture of it right here, and I'll also throw a link down in the description so you can go and check it out. If you look at the map, you see there's a little line across the northern section that's called the boundary, and that just makes me really think of Game of Thrones, where you have the wall in the north that's keeping out some big threat, which this book also has. You have this boundary, this magical barrier that is keeping some evil force at bay. So it's very reminiscent of Game of Thrones. The magic system revolves around two main classes. So you have the gifted and the augurs. And then you also have a lesser class called the shadows. So the gifted are able to use something called essence, which is like something inside of them, and they call it their reserve. And so they're able to pull from their reserve and wield magic out into the world. And then you have augurs. This might be a minor spoiler because you don't find out about this until a little bit later in the book. So if you want to not have that spoiled, you can skip ahead a little bit. But the augurs use magic outside. They pull essence from outside of themselves, and then they're able to use it. So the gifted pull from within, the augurs pull from outside. So whether that's essence from other people, whether that's essence from plants, other life forms, they pull from outside. And there's the lesser class, which is called the shadows, and they are people who were once gifted but have had that ability stripped from them, and you're mainly made a shadow for not being able to pass your trials, which is like the final exam kind of thing at the school for the gifted people. So the magic system, I think, is a hard magic system, but because there's so much mystery around the magic system, it feels like a soft magic system because you don't really know how the magic is used, and you don't really know like the abilities that people have and like what they can do with all of the skills and the abilities that they have. And so the characters are kind of on a learning experience on how they can use their magic, and the reader is also in that same boat, which I kind of wish there was a little bit more explanation of how the magic system works, but you kind of just like discover things as you go as people use it. Like the characters don't like sit down and have a conversation about like how they use certain abilities and certain ways. So you get to some of that as Davian starts to learn about his augur abilities. That's where you really get to kind of learn about how do they use the magic and what are the techniques in using the magic. So you get that for the augurs, I think, but not as much for the gifted. The gifted, it seems like they just use their magic and they just use it however they do, and you don't really know how that works. So because this is the first book in a trilogy, there's a lot of explanations and learning about the characters and the world and all of those kind of things. So it made the book feel a little bit slow, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but if you're looking for something that's kind of exciting and fast-paced, this is definitely not that kind of book. This book has a lot of mystery, a lot of intrigue, a lot of discovering about the magic, because the characters themselves don't really know how to use the magic because they're kids at a school, they're 16, 17 years of age, they're learning how to use their magic, and they don't even really know about the threat to the north beyond the boundary. And so everyone is on a quest of discovery, in a sense, throughout the whole book. The beginning of this book definitely reminds me of the Fellowship of the Ring, because you have a wise mentor character who sends Davian on this quest, and you have Weir who comes with Davian because he's loyal to Davian and he's one of his best friends, and so Weir wants to help him in his journey, similar to how Sam helps Frodo along his journey while he carries the ring. And there's also some other parallels throughout the book to the Fellowship of the Ring, but I won't get into them because that will be kind of spoilery. But I think James definitely did pull some inspiration from the Fellowship of the Ring, where you have two characters go on a quest, get some more party members, and you're kind of going along this story with these parties of characters. And some things happen along the way, people get separated and things like that. But it's definitely reminiscent of a quest needs to happen. You have characters that join the party and to help succeed in this quest. So overall, I thought the book was really well done. I enjoyed the mystery aspect of the book, just learning about the world and the characters and the magic system. And also, I like the coming of age aspect of it as well, because the characters also don't really know much about the magic system, so you're learning together, which I enjoyed, and the characters are becoming more mature, learning about, the political aspects as well, because they're young and they don't really know what the world has for them. They're young and inexperienced, so I enjoyed that as well. Wow, how the characters and the reader are on a journey of discovery together. So now I want to talk a little bit about the Christian themes that I saw in this book. and specifically one in particular about predestination, which I think is kind of a hot button topic in Christianity right now. So you have a character in the novel, well, maybe not a character, he's a deity named El, and he's kind of the version of God in the story. And then you have a character named Shamaloth, who we don't really meet, but he's just kind of talked about. Somewhere to today, where like you don't see Satan, you just kind of know he's there. And so similar in this book, so you have God and Satan, you have El and Shamaloth. And there's a passage that I want to read that kind of highlights this distinction. So let me get the passage here. So we have some characters who are just like having a conversation around the campfire. And so they mention something and he says, oh yeah, so he's talking about El, and he says the god of the augurs, who are the magical beings, and the god of predestination. And this character, his name's Nihim. He's kind of like a mentor character that the party picks up along the way. And he says, that's right, El sees everything, is in perfect and absolute control. The grand design, it's called. Everything that happens runs according to his purpose. Remind me to thank him for my last couple of months, Caden said. Nihim chuckled again. I didn't say he was responsible. I said it runs according to his purpose. Shamaloth has influences over this world too. He fights, but it's simply that he is in a war he cannot win, because every move he makes has already been accounted for by El. There was silence for a few seconds. Then why does El not simply finish him and be done with it? Stop every move he makes. Caden sounded irritated. Terrible things happen all the time. It hardly feels like he's losing. The point is, he's not losing. He's already lost. What you see are his death throes. Shamaloth was bound to this world in the Genesis War, and thus bound by time. He was trapped here, and now all he fights for is souls to serve him in his prison. He must not be doing a very good job. I haven't heard of many followers of Shamaloth, observed Caden, his tone dubious. It doesn't work like that. At the end of time, El will leave this world, taking those who gave him their faith. When he does, what protection this world has will vanish, and it will fall to Shamaloth to rule what remains, and only what remains, for eternity. Any who do not leave with El will be left here and serve him, like it or not. There was a pause. Caden obviously digested this. I can't say I like the idea of not being in control of my own destiny, he said eventually. If everything is already laid out, if there is really a grand design, wouldn't that mean we have no free will? Nihim grunted. I can't tell you how many times I heard that same question debated back in the Augur's day, he admitted. There are a lot of differing opinions, but I certainly think we have free will. Just because El knows each choice I'm going to make, even if he created me knowing it's the choice I would make, doesn't mean it's not mine, he sighed. But perhaps it's still not free will as you would think of it. That's the natural arrogance of man, sadly. We want to believe that free will means complete independence from the plans of our Creator. There was a contemplative silence. Tell me one thing, though, said Caden after a while. Since the augurs fell, how can you still have faith? Because my faith is in El. It was never in the augurs or what they were once capable of, explained Nihim. You can put your trust in something that's obvious, that's measurable, or predictable. But that's not faith, nor is believing in something that gives you no pause for doubt, no reason or desire to question. Faith is something more than that. By definition, it cannot have proof as its foundation. There was another silence. That makes sense, I suppose. It's something to think on, Caden conceded eventually, sounding more polite than convinced. That's good. You should think on it, Caden. It's important, regardless of what conclusion you come to. Why? Because it strikes me that a man needs to know what he believes before he can really know who he is. So that was my favorite passage in the book by far. And whenever I read that this is the passage that inspired me to kind of make a video about this. Because I think a lot of people have this idea of predestination where God is in control of everything about your life, and God chooses people for salvation, and that man has no responsibility for his actions. And I just loved a few things that were mentioned in this passage. Things like the point is he's losing. He's not losing, he's already lost, which is the same state that Satan is in. Satan is already lost the battle, and similar to what Shamaloth is doing here, what he does on earth are his death throes. He is just trying to get as many people not on God's side. He wants as many people to not follow God because he hates God. And this other sentence speaks truth in our culture. He says, he must not be doing a very good job. I haven't heard of many followers of Shamaloth. So you're not going to be walking around and hearing people say that they're a follower of Satan, but they're followers of Satan in the sense that they don't follow the ways of God. They are selfish, they're prideful, they follow what they want to do and their desires, and they leave behind the ways of God, and they say, I don't want anything to do with what God is doing, and I want only to do with what I'm about and what I want. So in that sense, they're following Satan and they're not following God. And then you have this section that's more specific to salvation in a sense, or predestination and free will. So he says, if everything's already laid out, if there's really a grand design, wouldn't that mean we have no free will? Which is the exact debate that people have today about, do we have free will, or do we choose our salvation? Do we accept the gift, or does God make us? Or does he just give us salvation because he chose us or he predestined us? And so this is kind of goes to the debate with Calvinism versus like traditionalism or biblical Christianity. I don't know how you want to phrase all the titles that people give things. But he says, just because L knows each choice I'm going to make, even if he created me knowing it's the choice I would make, doesn't mean it's not mine. But perhaps it's not free will as you would think of it. That's the natural arrogance of man, sadly. We want to believe that free will means complete independence from the plans of our Creator. So people saying that we have free will aren't saying that we are completely independent of God's will. What we're saying is that we have been given free will by God to choose or to reject him. Without the choice, there is no aspect of love in the relationship. And then the passage continues, and Caden asks another question that people ask today. He says, how can you still have faith because X thing happened? So in this story, you have the augurs fell. So this once mighty group of magical users have fell, and they can no longer use their power, and something terrible has happened. And so how can you still have faith after this thing has happened? And so people ask this same question today. How can you still have faith because X thing happened, because this shooting happened, because people are starving, all of these sorts of things. And then to top it all off at the end, it ends with this statement. And I absolutely love this because I think it's absolutely important to spiritual maturity and just being a mature adult. He says, so Caden asks, why should I think about this conversation? Why should I think about following God or believing in God? And he says, because it strikes me that a man needs to know what he believes before he really knows who he is. And I think that is so important in today's culture because I think a lot of people walk around and they don't think about spiritual things, and they don't think about things that are more important than them, that are beyond them. And I think that causes you to have a very narrow mindset and a very selfish mindset where you're only concerned about what you're doing in your life and maybe the few people around you and what they're doing. It makes you very myopic in how you view the world, and that God is so much bigger and the world is so much bigger than anything that you're doing. And I think that's a really important lesson for people to learn. Alright, so in conclusion, I thought the book was really well done, especially for someone's first novel. It's really good. I loved the characters, I loved the world building and the mystery surrounding everything and kind of discovering as the characters discover things. I thought the pacing could have been improved a little bit. Things felt a little slow in the middle of the book and didn't really pick up till maybe the last 100 pages or so. But yeah, really good book overall. If you like this video, please leave a like down below. Leave me a comment if you have any questions or whatever you thought about this book, and particularly the Christian elements that are within it. And if you don't want to miss another video, please subscribe. Hope to be doing these a lot more frequently on comic books, more novels. I'll do the other two books in this series. And yeah, I hope to see you guys in the next video. Thanks. Bye.